I've already done a painting difficulty tier list on this channel, but today we're doing something slightly different. This isn't about how hard an army is to paint, this is about how fast you can get it finished and on the table. Because those two things are not the same. Necrons are easy to paint, and they're also fast because the scheme is simple and the surfaces are forgiving. Tyranids are easy to paint, but they're not as fast because you're painting hundreds of bodies, even with a simple scheme. Speed is its own category and it deserves its own list. 5 tiers today. We got fast, average, take some commitment, nightmare, and a brand new 5th tier that I think a lot of you are going to relate to. I would never. Not because these armies are impossible to paint, but because looking at the model count and the detail and the time investment involved, I just don't have the time to commit to starting one of these as a painting project. So let's get into it. Fast tier. These are armies where a motivated painter can go from unboxed to table ready in a weekend or a couple of solid painting sessions. They got low model counts, forgiving surfaces, simple schemes that look great without requiring hours per model. First up, we got Adeptus Custodes. About 20 models for a full army, gold base coat, some Reikland flesh shade wash, Liberator gold dry brush, and you're 90% of the way there on every single model. They got nice detailed armor, so it kind of hides the imperfections. Low model count means you're never staring down an intimidating pile of unpainted plastic. I painted Custodes myself, and the speed at which you can get them looking ready is actually impressive. I did a gold base coat, Reikland flesh shade, that Liberator gold highlight, 3 steps per model, and they looked spectacular. You add a little bit of red for the cloak and blue for the gemstones and weapons, and it turns out amazing. Imperial Knights. They belong in the fast tier. They have even lower model count than Custodes, 3 or 4 enormous models, and takes up most of your army. Yes, each one of those takes longer than an infantry model to paint, but the total painting time for an entire Knights army is still significantly less painting than trying to tackle 50 Marines. Big flat panels, clear areas for heraldry, and a kind of model that rewards even basic weathering techniques with impressive results. I would go panel by panel, base coat each color section completely before moving on to the next. Don't try and do everything all at once on a model that size. Next, we got Necrons, my army, and I put them in the fast tier for a reason. I use the Sautek Dynasty scheme, so that lead belcher base, green accents, black, bronze, and gold to bring out the leaders, and it's one of the fastest army schemes I could come up with. They got the wide flat metallic panels that batch paint efficiently, washes did most of the work, and the whole army has a cohesive look that comes together quickly. Not many fiddly details, no complex blending, and no skin tones, except a little bit on like the flayed ones. I batch painted ruthlessly. Do all the base coating across every model before moving to washes, then highlighting. Assembly line painting cuts that total time significantly. Last, for the fast tier, we have Chaos Knights. Same logic as Imperial Knights, but they have some corruption details added on top. Some spikes and demon faces. A little bit of time per panel, but the total model count is still so low overall that speed remains fast. Even with that extra chaos detailing, you're finishing this army before most people have base coated their entire infantry squads. The corruption detailing can actually speed things up. That rust and grime, almost Nurgle styling weather effects are quick to apply and look intentional even when they're not perfectly executed. Average tier. These armies are absolutely achievable in a reasonable time frame, but each one has something that adds time. Whether that's model count, detail complexity, or just the number of colors you need to work through, a few weeks of consistent painting sessions rather than a weekend. Starting off with the Space Marines. Individual Space Marines are fast to paint. The problem is volume. Even a lean 2,000 point list requires a solid number of infantry, and each one needs the same base coat, shade, and highlight treatment. The scheme is simple, but multiplied across 40 models still adds up. I still keep it in the average instead of moving it down to taking some commitment because each individual model is quick. It's purely quantity that slows you down. So pick one or two accent colors, stick them across the whole army. Consistency speeds up batch painting more than anything else. Death Guard are in the average, not despite the corruption detailing, but because of how their detailing works. The whole aesthetic is rot, decay, and deliberate messiness, which means a rough dry brush and a heavy wash and some quick rust effects don't just look acceptable, they look accurate. You can paint Death Guard quickly and have them looking exactly right because imperfection is the point. Some tips: heavy washes and dry brushing are your friends. Egg-Rack's Earthshade over everything, and dry brush some bone detailing, staple on some rust, and you're done. It'll look great. Chaos Demons. They vary enormously depending on which god you focus on. Khorne Demons are red and bronze, simple and fast. Nurgle Demons are green-brown with intentional messiness. That's pretty fast. Tzeentch and Slaanesh start requiring more work and blend more into the taking some commitment territory. The average across all four gods lands them in average. Pick your god before committing to a scheme, and the speed changes significantly. Stick to one god's color palette, batch paint all units within before switching. Mixing god palettes mid-session kills your momentum. Tyranids have one of the fastest individual model schemes in the game. 2 or 3 colors, lots of organic surfaces that responds beautifully to washes. The scheme is not the problem, the model count is. Even with a paint by numbers approach, you're working through a lot of bodies that takes time. Simple per model, slow in aggregate. Average is the honest placement. Pick the simplest scheme you can live with and commit to it completely. Leviathan scheme, contrast paints over gray primer, is one of the fastest full army approaches in the game. Tau battlesuits have large flat panels that are incredibly quick to base coat and wash. Clean, futuristic aesthetic, with clear color blocking between armor, joints, and weapons. The infantry are simple, the drones are almost too easy, and the suits reward even basic edge highlighting with impressive results. What keeps them out of fast is the sheer number of panel sections on large suits that need individual attention. Edge highlighting on battlesuits makes an enormous difference to the finished look for relatively little time investment. A thin line of lighter color on each panel is worth doing. B tier, take some commitment. These armies are absolutely paintable and look incredible when finished, but each one is going to take a dedicated month or so of consistent painting sessions before you can complete a table-ready force. So if you go in knowing that, makes life a lot easier. World Eaters. That red and bronze scheme sounds simple till you start painting it. Going through all that chaos trim through them can be very difficult, so try and go in and be deliberate with your painting to try and speed it up. I highly recommend doing it as batch painted as you can. Try and just tackle all the trim when you're ready to, and it makes life a little bit easier. Emperor's Children. A newer model range with the kind of detail that Games Workshop has been putting into their most recent releases. Every Emperor's Children model has an intricate armor paneling, some corruption details, and the kind of sculpt that rewards detailed work and punishes rushing. The kind of black, purple, and gold scheme requires smooth color transitions to look right, and the detail density means you can't batch paint as efficiently as simpler armies. Hard-earned, but spectacular when done right. Leagues of Votann. And I've spoken about this directly and personally. I own them, and I struggled with them. The models look deceptively simple from a distance, but up close they are crammed with tiny details. Armor paneling, equipment straps, mechanical components, facial features on heads that are smaller than most other factions. Everything is compact and intricate in a way that made brush access difficult. I still look at my Votann army and wish I had done better. Putting them into a harder tier is absolutely earned. Take your time with the faces. Votann heads are small, but they're often the first thing people look at. Getting the skin and eye areas right make the whole model look more finished even when the armor is basic. Nightmare tier. These armies are going to take months of dedicated painting to complete. Not because they're impossible, but because they're a combination of model count and detail complexity, and time per model adds up to a serious long-term commitment before you finish an army. So keep your eyes open before you commit. Astra Militarum. Going for the vehicle heavy guard list drops out of what I would never and into nightmare difficulty purely because tanks are faster per model than infantry. But there's still a lot of vehicles to paint. Each one has a significant surface area, and getting weathered and battle damage right across a whole fleet takes some time. So I put them in C tier rather than I would never, but only just because of the parking lot build. Adeptus Sororitas. They have incredible ornate armor covered with the religious filigree and purity seals. Gold trim on every single model. The robes require a different technique than the armor. The faces need careful work. And there are enough models in a sister's army that the detail density multiplied by a model count creates a daunting total painting commitment. They're beautiful when finished, one of my favorite looking armies, but a nightmare to get there quickly. Try and paint the armor and robes as completely separate steps. Trying to paint both at the same time on a model with this much ornate detail leads to overspill that takes longer to fix than it would have been to just be careful in the first place. Chaos Space Marines. All the time investment of the regular Space Marines, plus trim, spikes, chains, corruption details, and the mark system, meaning different units can have different accents depending on their god dedication. You can't fully batch paint a CSM army the way you can vanilla Marines because the variety and the range means every unit has something slightly different to deal with. Gorgeous models, just slower to paint. Decide your god dedication before you buy and stick to one color accent across the whole army. Trying to represent multiple gods in one collection multiplies your time significantly. Orcs. Tons of details on every model, plus tons of models in a competitive list. Green skin, dirty metal, rough clothing, choppas, shooters, squigs, vehicles. Orcs have remarkable detail density for what's supposed to be a scrap-built army. The saving grace is that your aesthetic is forgiving. The saving grace is that the aesthetic forgives rough painting, but even painting them roughly takes time when you're painting hundreds of them. A quick tip is to do the skin across every model before touching anything else. Green skin is your biggest surface area, and knocking it out across your army first gives you momentum and consistency. Sorry. Elegant, detailed models that require precision to look right. Smooth armor transitions, gem effects, ruin details, flowing robes. Each individual model takes longer than most because rushing an Eldari model shows in a way that rushing an orc doesn't. Add a reasonable army model count on top and you're looking at months of work to do the range justice. Drukhari. Similar challenges as Eldari, but the darker color schemes that require careful highlighting to stop them from looking flat. And skin tones on some of the more exposed models need real attention. The high contrast aesthetic that makes Drukhari visually striking is difficult and time consuming to pull off well. So I put them in the nightmare tier and not too far from a range that I would never. Dark armies need strong edge highlighting to read well on the table, so try not to skip it. A flat dark army looks unfinished even if every other step is done correctly. And finally, the I would never tier. Let me be clear about what this means. These armies are not unpaintable. People paint them and do a great job. Talented hobbyists produce incredible results with all of these factions. But when I look at the combination of model count, detail complexity, and total time investment involved, I personally can't commit to painting any of these as a full army. Not because I couldn't, but because life is short and I have too many other things on the go. This is where I would add Astra Militarum, but the infantry horde this time. Why? 100 or more models. Each needs base coating, washing, highlighting, faces, equipment, basing. The individual models are not too complex, but the sheer volume is just a nightmare. If you want to experience what it feels like to paint forever without finishing anything, collect an infantry guard army. I say this with enormous respect for the people who do it. A fully painted guard army horde is one of the most impressive sights in the hobby. I just could never do it myself. So if you're going to get into guard infantry, pick the absolute quickest scheme you can live with, contrast paints, single shade washes, and be done. Any extra work is multiplied by 100 models, and the time commitment you need is exponential for it. Add mech. Cyborg bodies with mechanical limbs, robes, cables, electronic components, exposed organic tissue, the kind of detail density that makes professional painters pause before starting. Multiple materials required completely different techniques on the same model. Multiple colors that need to be clean and distinct, and a model count that's not small. AdMech is in I would never. Absolute respect to anyone who's painted an AdMech army. I'll be admiring them from a safe distance. If you're committed to an AdMech, invest serious time into learning techniques for the metal sections. The mechanical elements are the most prominent features, and getting them right transforms the whole model. Gene Stealer cults. Everything I said about AdMech, but with the added challenge of hybrid models that require you to switch techniques constantly on the same model. Alien skin sitting next to human clothing, sitting next to equipment, sitting next to alien limbs. Multiple skin tones, multiple textures, multiple color palettes, all needed to coexist on a single model. Then multiply that by a full army's worth of infantry. Gene Stealer cults are an I would never tier, and I'm at peace with that decision. If you love GSC and you're committed, build a strong base coat and wash recipe for the skin tones first. The alien elements are what define these models, and getting a fast, repeatable method for the skin will save you enormous time across the army. So that's it. That's every Warhammer 40k faction ranked by speed of painting. Fast, average, takes some time commitment, nightmare, and the very special I would never tier for those last 3 armies that I respect enormously, but will never attempt myself. If you want a companion piece to this video, how difficult each army is to paint rather than just how fast, that's already on the channel. The 2 lists together should give you a complete picture before committed to any army. And as always, tell me where I went wrong. Drop your army in the comments. Let me know whether you think I've placed it correctly. If you're an AdMech army who's finished in under 3 months, I want to hear from you. If you don't mind, like, subscribe, and we'll see you in the next one.